People who don't have friends often share personality traits that most people completely misunderstand. Society is quick to assume they are lonely, rejected, or socially awkward, but the truth is often far more interesting. One of the strongest personality traits they share is that they value solitude more than social approval. They are not always without friends because people avoid them. In many cases, they have consciously chosen to spend more time alone because they refuse to sacrifice their peace, their principles, or their identity simply to fit into a crowd. While many people fear being alone, they discover that solitude can become one of the greatest teachers in life. This personality trait immediately separates them from the majority. Most people naturally seek acceptance because human beings are wired to belong. They want to be included, appreciated, and surrounded by others. There is nothing wrong with this desire. However, people who don't have friends often think differently. They ask themselves a different question. Instead of asking, how can I make people like me? They ask, is this relationship adding value to my life? That small difference completely changes the way they choose the people around them. They are willing to walk alone if the alternative means pretending to be someone they are not. It often reminds us that self-knowledge is one of the greatest forms of power. A person who cannot spend time alone rarely understands themselves because they are constantly influenced by the opinions, expectations, and emotions of other people. But those who naturally embrace solitude develop a habit that many never master. They become comfortable listening to their own thoughts. Instead of constantly seeking entertainment or approval, they spend time reflecting on their decisions, studying human nature, and understanding their own strengths and weaknesses. Solitude becomes their classroom, and silence becomes their teacher. This personality trait also makes them less likely to follow the crowd. They are not easily influenced by trends, social pressure, or the fear of missing out. When everyone else rushes in one direction, they pause and ask whether that direction truly aligns with their values. This independent thinking often causes others to misunderstand them. Some may call them distant, reserved, or even arrogant. But in reality, they simply refuse to let popularity become more important than authenticity. They understand that gaining acceptance by abandoning your true character is not success. It is quiet surrender. Another reason they value solitude is because they recognize the difference between being surrounded by people and being genuinely understood. Many individuals have large social circles yet still feel emotionally isolated because their relationships are built on convenience, appearances, or temporary benefits. People who don't have friends often notice this contradiction. They realize that a room full of conversations does not automatically create meaningful connection. Because of this awareness, they become extremely selective about who deserves access to their lives. They would rather have no close friends than invest their trust in relationships built on dishonesty, gossip, or emotional manipulation. This personality trait also gives them remarkable emotional resilience. Since they are not constantly depending on social approval, their confidence begins to grow from within rather than from external validation. They do not measure their worth by the number of messages they receive, the invitations they accept, or the attention they attract. Instead, they build confidence through discipline, personal growth, and quiet achievement. This inner stability makes them difficult to manipulate because they are not desperate for acceptance. The less someone depends on approval, the less power other people have over them. Many of these individuals also discover that solitude creates space for improvement. While others spend hours chasing popularity or trying to impress people who barely know them, they invest that same time differently. They read books, develop valuable skills, improve their physical health, build careers, learn new ideas, or simply reflect on the direction of their lives. They understand that every hour spent becoming stronger today creates opportunities tomorrow. This is why many successful thinkers, creators, leaders, and innovators have experienced long seasons of solitude. They were not hiding from the world. They were preparing themselves for it. Of course, valuing solitude does not mean they never experience loneliness. They are still human. There are moments when they wish they had someone to share their victories or challenges with. But this personality trait teaches them an important lesson. Temporary loneliness is often less damaging than surrounding yourself with people who constantly drain your energy, pressure you to compromise your values, or distract you from your purpose. They understand that protecting their peace today increases the chance of building healthier relationships in the future. Perhaps the greatest strength of this personality trait is that it allows them to remain authentic regardless of who is watching. They do not constantly change their opinions to gain approval or hide parts of their personality to fit into different groups. The person they are in private is usually the same person they are in public. That consistency creates quiet confidence because they are no longer living to satisfy other people's expectations. Instead, they are building a life that reflects their own values, goals, and principles. The truth is that people who don't have friends are often misunderstood because society confuses solitude with failure. But choosing to be alone is very different from being unable to connect with others. For many of these individuals, solitude is not a punishment. It is a conscious decision that protects their focus, strengthens their character, and allows them to grow without the constant pressure of social approval. Their greatest personality trait is not that they enjoy being alone. It is that they value becoming the right person before searching for the right people. And once you understand why people who don't have friends value solitude more than social approval, the next personality trait becomes even clearer. They trust people very slowly because experience has taught them that loyalty is earned through consistent actions, not convincing words. Once you understand that people who don't have friends often value solitude more than social approval, another personality trait begins to reveal itself. They trust people very slowly because they have learned to observe human nature before giving someone a place in their lives. Most people form opinions within minutes of meeting someone. They are influenced by charm, confidence, appearance, or the excitement of a new connection. But people who don't have many friends usually think differently. Instead of asking whether someone is interesting, they quietly ask whether that person is trustworthy. This habit may make them appear distant at first, but in reality, it is one of the strongest personality traits they possess. Robert Greene often teaches that appearances are one of the greatest illusions in human nature. People naturally present the version of themselves they want others to see. First impressions can be carefully managed. Words can be rehearsed. Kindness can be temporary. Confidence can be performed. But character eventually reveals itself through repeated actions. People who don't have friends understand this principle deeply. They know that anyone can make promises during the beginning of a relationship, but only time can reveal consistency. Because of this understanding, they rarely rush into friendships. They allow people enough time to show who they truly are. This personality trait is often shaped by experience. Many individuals who now have very few friends were not always this cautious. At one point, they trusted easily, believed promises, and expected honesty from everyone they met. But life taught them difficult lessons. They experienced betrayal, disappointment, broken loyalty, or relationships that slowly revealed hidden motives. Those experiences changed the way they viewed human nature. Instead of becoming bitter, they became more observant. They realized that trust should not be given simply because someone appears kind. It should be earned through consistent behavior over time. One of the first things they observe is whether a person's actions match their words. Anyone can speak about loyalty, honesty, or respect. Those words sound impressive, but words alone have very little value. People who don't have friends pay attention to something far more important. They watch what people do when there is nothing to gain. They notice how someone treats strangers, how they behave under pressure, and whether they remain honest when telling the truth becomes inconvenient. They understand that genuine character is revealed during difficult moments, not comfortable ones. This careful observation also protects them from emotional manipulation. Many people become emotionally attached before they truly understand the person standing in front of them. Once feelings become involved, they begin ignoring warning signs because they do not want to lose the relationship they have already imagined. People who don't have friends often avoid this trap by refusing to rush the process. They stay emotionally balanced while quietly gathering information. They are patient enough to let someone's true personality reveal itself naturally. This patience often saves them from relationships that would eventually bring unnecessary pain. Another reason they trust slowly is because they understand that loyalty is rare. In today's world, many relationships are based on convenience. People stay close while the relationship benefits them, but disappear when circumstances change. Individuals who have few friends have usually recognized this pattern. They know that real friendship is tested during difficult times, not during moments of success. It is easy to stand beside someone when everything is going well. True loyalty becomes visible when supporting someone requires sacrifice, honesty, or courage. Because genuine loyalty is uncommon, they refuse to hand out trust carelessly. Some people misunderstand this personality trait and assume these individuals are cold or antisocial. In reality, the opposite is often true. They value meaningful relationships so much that they refuse to build shallow ones. They understand that trust is one of the most valuable things a person can offer. Once it is broken, rebuilding it is never simple. Rather than constantly repairing broken friendships, they prefer taking extra time in the beginning to understand who truly deserves their confidence. Their caution is not fear. It is wisdom developed through experience. This habit also allows them to become exceptional observers of human behavior. While others are distracted by charming personalities, they quietly notice patterns. They recognize who always blames others for their mistakes, who changes their personality depending on the people around them, who speaks negatively about absent friends, and who only appears during moments of personal benefit. These small details may seem insignificant to most people, but together they reveal a person's true intentions. People who don't have friends often notice these patterns long before everyone else does, which explains why they remain selective about who enters their lives. There is another important benefit to this personality trait. Because they trust slowly, the friendships they eventually build tend to be deeper and more stable. They are not interested in collecting acquaintances or surrounding themselves with large social circles simply for appearance. They seek honesty, mutual respect, and reliability. They understand that one loyal friend who consistently stands beside you is far more valuable than dozens of people who disappear the moment life becomes difficult. Their goal is never popularity. Their goal is authenticity. The truth is that trusting slowly is not a weakness. It is a sign that someone understands the value of emotional investment. They know that every friendship influences their mindset, their habits, and their future. That is why they choose carefully. They would rather spend extra time observing than spend years recovering from misplaced trust. In a world where many people judge others by appearances, they judge people by consistency. That simple difference protects their peace and shapes the quality of every relationship they choose to build. And once you understand why people who don't have friends trust others so slowly, the next personality trait becomes impossible to ignore. They have standards so strong that they would rather remain alone than surround themselves with fake relationships that slowly compromise their self-respect. Once you understand that people who don't have friends value solitude and trust others slowly, another defining personality trait becomes impossible to ignore. They have strong personal standards and refuse to settle for fake relationships simply to avoid being alone. This is one of the biggest reasons they often have very few friends. It is not because they cannot connect with people. It is because they refuse to build connections that require them to sacrifice their self-respect, their values, or their peace of mind. While many people fear losing relationships, they fear losing themselves even more. Most people naturally want to belong. They are willing to overlook small acts of disrespect, tolerate unhealthy behavior, or remain in one-sided friendships because they believe having people around them is better than standing alone. At first, these compromises seem harmless. A disrespectful joke is ignored, a broken promise is excused, dishonesty is explained away. Slowly, these small compromises become a pattern. Before long, people find themselves surrounded by relationships that offer familiarity but very little respect. People who don't have friends often recognize this pattern early, and that awareness becomes one of their strongest personality traits. Robert Greene frequently explains that human nature is driven by self-interest. While many people are capable of loyalty and kindness, others will naturally push the limits of what you allow. They observe your reactions, consciously or unconsciously, to understand how much they can demand without consequences. People who don't have friends usually understand this reality. They know that every relationship teaches others how they are allowed to treat you. If you consistently ignore disrespect, people begin believing that disrespect has become acceptable. This is why they protect their standards from the very beginning instead of trying to repair broken respect later. One of the most noticeable characteristics of these individuals is that they are comfortable walking away from relationships that no longer align with their principles. This decision is rarely made out of anger or pride. It comes from clarity. They understand that staying connected to people who constantly create drama, spread negativity, manipulate emotions, or betray trust eventually damages their own character. Instead of asking themselves how to keep every friendship alive, they ask a much more important question. Is this relationship helping me become a better person, or is it slowly pulling me away from who I want to be? That question guides many of their decisions. This personality trait often causes them to be misunderstood. Some people describe them as overly selective, difficult to approach, or impossible to please. But those judgments usually come from individuals who mistake healthy standards for unnecessary distance. There is a significant difference between rejecting people out of arrogance and protecting yourself out of wisdom. People who don't have friends are not searching for perfection because they know perfection does not exist. They simply believe that honesty, respect, loyalty, and mutual effort are non-negotiable qualities in any meaningful relationship. Another reason they maintain high standards is because they understand the hidden influence of the people around them. Every friendship quietly shapes your habits, your beliefs, and your emotional health. Spend enough time with people who constantly complain and negativity begins to feel normal. Spend enough time with dishonest individuals and integrity slowly loses its importance. Spend enough time with people who gossip about others, and eventually you begin questioning who they speak about when you are not present. People who don't have friends recognize that relationships are never neutral. Every relationship either strengthens your character or slowly weakens it. Because of this awareness, they refuse to chase friendships simply for the sake of appearances. In today's world, having a large social circle is often treated as proof of success. Social media encourages the illusion that popularity equals happiness. But people with strong standards see through this illusion. They understand that being surrounded by many people means very little if those relationships are built on competition, jealousy, convenience, or hidden agendas. They would rather invest their time in becoming a better person than constantly trying to impress people who do not genuinely value them. This personality trait also gives them remarkable consistency. They do not change their principles depending on who enters the room. They refuse to compromise their values just to gain temporary acceptance. If a friendship requires dishonesty, constant people-pleasing, or pretending to be someone they are not, they quietly step away. While this choice may leave them with very few friends, it also allows them to preserve something far more valuable, their integrity. They understand that losing yourself to maintain relationships is never a victory. There are moments when maintaining high standards feels difficult. Watching others enjoy large social circles can create temporary doubt. They may wonder whether they are expecting too much from people, but with time, experience repeatedly confirms the wisdom of their choices. They see others become trapped in exhausting friendships, filled with conflict, betrayal, and emotional manipulation, while their own smaller circle remains built on trust and authenticity. This reinforces their belief that quality will always matter more than quantity. The truth is that people who don't have friends are often not lacking opportunities to build relationships. They are simply unwilling to accept relationships that fail to meet their standards of respect, honesty, and loyalty. Their personality is shaped by the belief that genuine friendship should bring peace, encouragement, and growth, not constant stress or emotional confusion. They understand that protecting your standards may reduce the number of people in your life, but it dramatically increases the quality of those who remain. And once you understand why people who don't have friends refuse to settle for fake relationships, the next personality trait becomes even more powerful. They develop a level of emotional independence that allows them to rely on themselves instead of constantly seeking validation from the people around them. Once you understand that people who don't have friends value solitude, trust others carefully, and refuse to settle for fake relationships, another personality trait becomes clear. They develop a level of emotional independence that most people never fully achieve. Instead of relying on constant attention, approval, or reassurance from others, they learn to rely on themselves. This personality trait is not something they are born with. It is usually developed through experience. After spending enough time alone, they begin discovering that confidence built from within is far stronger than confidence borrowed from other people's opinions. Most people naturally seek validation. They feel encouraged when others praise them and discouraged when they are criticized. While this reaction is completely human, it also creates a hidden weakness. If your confidence depends entirely on how other people see you, then your emotional state is always in someone else's hands. A compliment can lift your mood, while a single negative opinion can destroy it. People who don't have friends often escape this cycle because they spend enough time alone to build a different foundation. Instead of asking, "Do people approve of me?" they begin asking, "Am I living according to my own values?" That question quietly transforms the way they see themselves. Robert Greene often explains that true power begins with self-mastery. A person who constantly depends on external approval becomes easy to influence because their emotions rise and fall according to other people's reactions. But individuals who have learned to stand alone develop a quiet confidence that cannot easily be manipulated. They stop chasing acceptance because they realize that acceptance gained by abandoning your true self is never worth having. They would rather disappoint the crowd than disappoint their own principles. This emotional independence changes the way they make decisions. Many people hesitate before making important choices because they fear criticism. They worry about what friends, relatives, coworkers, or strangers might think. As a result, they postpone opportunities, ignore their instincts, and slowly begin living according to other people's expectations instead of their own purpose. People who don't have friends often avoid this trap. Since they are already accustomed to standing alone, they become comfortable making difficult decisions without waiting for universal approval. They understand that every meaningful path in life eventually requires the courage to walk alone. Another reason this personality trait becomes so powerful is that it protects them from emotional manipulation. Many unhealthy relationships survive because one person fears losing approval. They tolerate disrespect because they are afraid of being abandoned. They remain silent because they do not want to create conflict. They constantly sacrifice their own needs because they believe keeping everyone happy is more important than protecting themselves. But emotionally independent people gradually stop making these compromises. They understand that peace built on constant self-sacrifice is not real peace. It is emotional exhaustion disguised as kindness. Because they rely on themselves emotionally, they also become more resilient during difficult times. Life is unpredictable. Friendships change, relationships end. Circumstances shift without warning. Individuals who have always depended on other people for emotional stability often struggle when those relationships disappear. But people who don't have friends have already spent years learning how to face challenges alone. They know how to think through problems, comfort themselves during disappointment, and continue moving forward without waiting for someone else to rescue them. This ability does not eliminate pain, but it prevents pain from completely controlling their lives. This personality trait also influences the way they measure success. Instead of comparing themselves with everyone around them, they focus on personal progress. They understand that someone else's achievements do not reduce their own potential. While many people become trapped in competition and comparison, emotionally independent individuals compete mainly with the person they were yesterday. Every new skill, every disciplined habit, and every lesson learned becomes proof of growth. Their confidence comes from action rather than applause, and that makes it far more stable over time. Of course, emotional independence should never be confused with emotional isolation. People who don't have friends are not trying to prove that they never need anyone. Human beings are naturally social, and healthy relationships remain one of life's greatest blessings. The difference is that emotionally independent people do not depend on relationships to define their identity. They appreciate genuine companionship when it exists, but they refuse to believe that their worth disappears in its absence. Their value remains constant whether they are surrounded by people or standing completely alone. There is another important advantage to this personality trait. Because they are not desperate for approval, they become far more authentic in their interactions with others. They do not constantly adjust their personality to match every social situation. They are not afraid to express respectful disagreement, admit mistakes, or maintain their principles even when those choices are unpopular. Ironically, this authenticity often earns genuine respect. People tend to trust individuals who remain consistent because consistency reveals confidence. Those who know exactly who they are rarely feel the need to pretend. The greatest lesson hidden within this personality trait is that freedom begins the moment you stop allowing other people to decide how valuable you are. When your confidence depends on likes, praise, invitations, or public recognition, your emotional well-being becomes fragile. But when your confidence is built through discipline, integrity, and self-respect, it becomes remarkably difficult for anyone to take it away. People who don't have friends often discover this truth long before others because solitude teaches them to become their own source of encouragement. The truth is that emotional independence is one of the defining personality traits shared by many people who have very few friends. They have learned that while relationships can enrich life, self-respect must always come first. Their confidence is not created by popularity, but by the quiet certainty that they are living according to their own values, regardless of whether anyone else approves. And once you understand why people who don't have friends become emotionally independent, the next personality trait reveals why they speak less, observe more, and often understand human nature better than the people constantly seeking attention. Once you understand that people who don't have friends often become emotionally independent, another personality trait naturally stands out. They speak less, observe more, and reveal very little about themselves. While many people feel the need to fill every silence with conversation or constantly share every detail of their lives, these individuals do the opposite. They understand that listening often reveals far more than speaking, and careful observation allows them to understand people on a much deeper level. This personality trait is one of the main reasons they often remain misunderstood. Their quiet nature is mistaken for shyness, arrogance, or disinterest, when in reality it is usually a sign of patience, self-control, and thoughtful awareness. Robert Greene frequently explains that human nature is easier to understand when you spend more time observing than reacting. People reveal themselves through small habits that most others never notice. The words they choose, the way they treat people who cannot benefit them, how they respond to criticism, how quickly they change their opinions around different groups, and whether their actions consistently match their promises, all of these details quietly expose character. People who don't have friends often develop this habit because they spend less time trying to impress others and more time paying attention. Instead of rushing to form opinions, they quietly collect information until patterns begin to appear. This personality trait also protects them from making emotional decisions too quickly. Many people become attached to someone simply because they enjoy a pleasant conversation or receive temporary kindness. Excitement often replaces judgment, and emotions begin writing stories before reality has had enough time to speak. But people who don't have friends usually move at a different pace. They are comfortable allowing silence to exist. They are willing to observe how someone behaves over weeks or months before deciding how much trust that person deserves. This patience often prevents them from entering relationships that later become sources of disappointment. Another reason they speak less is because they understand the value of information. Every conversation reveals something, and not always about the person who is talking the most. People naturally expose their priorities, fears, ambitions, insecurities, and habits through ordinary discussions. Those who listen carefully often learn far more than those who constantly seek attention. This does not mean they manipulate people or secretly judge everyone they meet. It simply means they recognize that understanding others begins with paying attention rather than dominating every conversation. Because they reveal very little about themselves, many people become curious about them. Human nature is naturally drawn toward mystery. Someone who constantly explains every decision, shares every emotion, and seeks approval for every thought becomes easy to predict. But people who don't have friends often protect their personal lives with quiet discipline. They understand that privacy is not secrecy, it is wisdom. Not every opinion needs to be announced. Not every goal needs to be shared before it is accomplished. Not every personal struggle requires public attention. They choose carefully who earns the privilege of knowing the deeper parts of their lives. This personality trait is often strengthened by experience. Many individuals who now remain reserved were once extremely open. They trusted easily, overshared their thoughts, and believed honesty would always be respected. But experience taught them that not everyone values personal information with good intentions. Some people misuse vulnerability, spread private conversations, or turn personal weaknesses into future weapons during conflict. Rather than becoming fearful, they became more selective. They learned that openness should be guided by trust, not by impulse. Their quiet nature also gives them an advantage that many people overlook. Because they are not constantly speaking, they notice details others completely miss. They observe changes in tone, body language, facial expressions, and emotional reactions. They recognize inconsistencies between what people say and what they actually do. While others become distracted by charm or confidence, they quietly focus on consistency. Over time, this habit allows them to understand human behavior with remarkable accuracy. It is one of the reasons they are often difficult to deceive. They trust patterns more than promises and actions more than words. Of course, this personality trait sometimes creates misunderstandings. Friends, coworkers, or new acquaintances may assume they are unfriendly simply because they are quiet. Some may mistake thoughtful silence for emotional distance. But people who don't have friends usually accept this misunderstanding because they know that genuine relationships are built through understanding rather than appearances. They do not feel the need to constantly explain themselves to everyone they meet. They understand that the people who truly matter will eventually recognize the difference between silence and indifference. There is another powerful lesson hidden within this personality trait. Speaking less often creates greater emotional control. When people react immediately to every situation, emotions frequently guide their decisions. Hurt feelings produce harsh words. Anger creates unnecessary conflict. Excitement leads to promises that cannot be kept. But those who pause before speaking give themselves time to think. They choose their words more carefully because they understand that once words are spoken, they cannot be taken back. Their silence is not empty, it is thoughtful. Their restraint is not weakness, it is discipline. The truth is that people who don't have friends often develop this quiet personality because they have learned that understanding people is more valuable than constantly trying to be understood. They know that careful observation protects them from unnecessary disappointment, strengthens their judgment, and allows them to build relationships based on reality instead of appearances. While others chase attention through endless conversation, they quietly build wisdom through listening. And in a world where everyone wants to be heard, the rare person who truly listens often understands human nature better than anyone else. And once you understand why people who don't have friends speak less and observe more, the final personality trait reveals how they stop chasing popularity altogether and build a purpose so strong that genuine respect naturally follows them instead of being pursued. As you have seen throughout this journey, people who don't have friends often share personality traits that are completely different from what society assumes. They value solitude over social approval, trust people slowly, refuse fake relationships, become emotionally independent, and learn to observe more than they speak. All of these traits naturally lead to one final personality trait that brings everything together. They build a purpose so strong that they stop chasing popularity altogether. Instead of making their lives revolve around being accepted, they focus on becoming valuable. This shift changes not only the way they see themselves, but also the way the world begins to see them. Most people spend a significant part of their lives trying to fit in. They worry about whether they are liked, whether they are invited, whether people agree with their opinions, or whether they are being noticed. Without realizing it, they slowly begin making decisions based on approval rather than purpose. They choose careers to impress others, stay in friendships that no longer help them grow, and silence their true personalities to avoid rejection. People who don't have friends often break away from this cycle because they eventually realize that popularity is temporary, but purpose has lasting value. Robert Greene frequently teaches that true influence never comes from desperately seeking attention. It comes from becoming someone whose actions naturally command respect. The most powerful individuals throughout history rarely spent their lives trying to convince everyone to like them. Instead, they became so disciplined, so skilled, and so committed to their purpose that recognition followed naturally. People who don't have friends often discover this lesson earlier than others because they have already learned how to live without constant validation. Once they stop depending on approval, they gain the freedom to invest their energy where it matters most. This personality trait transforms the way they spend their time. While many people invest countless hours trying to maintain appearances or keep relationships that no longer serve them, these individuals quietly build themselves. They read books that expand their thinking. They develop professional skills that create opportunities. They strengthen their physical and mental health through discipline. They learn from failure instead of allowing failure to define them. Every day becomes another opportunity to become a stronger version of themselves. Their satisfaction no longer comes from being noticed. It comes from making meaningful progress. One of the most important things they understand is that purpose creates confidence in a way popularity never can. Popularity depends on other people. It rises and falls according to changing opinions, trends, and circumstances. Purpose, however, depends on personal commitment. Every time they honor their values, complete meaningful work, or overcome another challenge, their confidence grows stronger. This confidence cannot easily be taken away because it is earned through action rather than gifted through approval. It becomes part of their identity instead of something they borrow from the people around them. Because they are focused on purpose, they also become much more selective about where they invest their energy. They no longer feel the need to attend every gathering, participate in every argument, or chase every opportunity for attention. They recognize that time is one of life's most valuable resources. Every unnecessary distraction steals time that could have been used to improve their future. As a result, they become comfortable saying no to situations that do not align with their goals. To others, this may appear as distance, but in reality, it is disciplined focus. Interestingly, this personality trait often creates the exact opposite result that many people expect. The less they chase popularity, the more genuine respect they begin to receive. Human nature is naturally drawn toward people who possess quiet confidence and clear direction. Individuals who know what they stand for rarely need to advertise it. Their actions speak louder than their words. Others begin noticing their consistency, their discipline, and their calm presence. Respect grows naturally because it is based on character rather than performance. Another reason purpose becomes so important is that it protects them from loneliness. People often believe that happiness depends entirely on having many friends, but meaningful purpose fills life with direction even during seasons of solitude. When someone wakes each day with goals worth pursuing, lessons worth learning, and work worth doing, they no longer measure every moment by the number of people around them. Their energy is invested in creating something meaningful, instead of constantly wondering whether they are accepted. This sense of direction gives their life stability regardless of changing social circumstances. Of course, having purpose does not mean rejecting friendship forever. In fact, many people who don't have friends eventually build deep and meaningful relationships. The difference is that they no longer search for friendships out of desperation or fear of being alone. They allow relationships to develop naturally with people who genuinely share their values. Instead of chasing acceptance, they attract individuals who appreciate authenticity, loyalty, and mutual respect. Their smaller social circle often becomes stronger because it is built on quality rather than quantity. Perhaps the greatest lesson hidden within this personality trait is that becoming valuable is always more important than becoming popular. Popularity can disappear overnight because it depends on changing opinions. Purpose continues growing because it is rooted in personal discipline. People who don't have friends understand that the most important relationship they will ever build is the one they have with themselves. If they can respect their own decisions, remain loyal to their values, and continue moving toward meaningful goals, they know they are living successfully, regardless of how many people surround them. The truth is that people who don't have friends are often misunderstood because society focuses on numbers instead of character. Their personality traits reveal something far deeper than social preference. They choose solitude when necessary, trust carefully, protect their standards, rely on themselves, observe quietly, and dedicate their lives to meaningful purpose. These qualities may leave them with fewer friendships, but they often lead to greater wisdom, stronger character, and a life built on authenticity instead of approval. So the next time you meet someone who has very few friends, do not immediately assume they are lonely or lacking something important. They may simply possess personality traits that have taught them one of life's greatest lessons, that becoming the right person will always matter more than being accepted by the wrong people.